not alone on your journey. Listen in to the Unshakable Living Show, Supernaturally and Divinely Unshakable with Lysa Beltz. Twice a month for your well-deserved dose of positive energy and your personal reminder that you are perfectly imperfect, and that's okay. Find your true calling and influence the world around you for the better with your profound gifts. Walk away feeling truly unshakable. Remember, God can't steer a parked car, so step on the gas now with Lysa and let him do the rest. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. This is your host, Lysa, and I am really excited to introduce my guest tonight, Kristin Oakley. Kristin comes to us all the way from North Carolina. So good evening, Kristin.
Good evening, Lysa. Thank you so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be here.
Yep, and I know we had tried to get you on last month and that just didn't work out. So we believe that just is God's absolute perfect timing. And those of you who are tuning in tonight are supposed to be here. And so I want to just touch briefly on my show from last time. 2 weeks ago, I had Melissa Walsh on. And again, Melissa and I talked about setting intentions. And for the first 3 months of this year, my overall umbrella theme is laying a foundation so that you can hit the gas in 2022 and really go build the life that you're called to build. And tonight we're going to talk about identity. So before we dive into that too far, I want to have Kristin introduce herself and just give a little bit of background. And Kristin, if you want to go straight into a little bit about your journey and how you found your identity, let's just go for it.
All right, let's do it. Well, again, my name is Kristin Oakley, and I've had the pleasure of knowing Lysa for the last couple of years, and what a gift she is. And I'm so excited to be able to share this time with you. So thank you for having me.
I'm glad to have you.
Well, thank you. I've had a very unique journey. And the reason I say that is I have now been out of college for almost 21 years. And if you just look solely at my career path, it's been very full and very varied. I recently came across a stat that according to the Department of Labor, now by the time someone reaches the age of 35, they will have on average had 8 different jobs.
Oh, wow. Oh, wow.
Isn't that wild?
That's crazy.
That whole notion of womb to tomb employment, we saw previous generations graduate from college, get a degree, get a job, work at that job for 40 years, and that was it.
Yep, that was my dad.
Exactly, right? And so that has been the antithesis of my own journey. But what I'm learning is that's more and more common. So I share that because I think a lot of times our identity can be very tied into our work and what we're doing. And so I feel like my journey with my identity has had so many different chapters, and I'm realizing it's something I will continue to be growing in for the rest of my life. But just a little background on where I've come from. I graduated from the College of William and Mary, and I was a marketing major. But upon my senior year was really when this concept of identity really began to hit home for me. I had just gotten broken up with, and it was not a good situation.
That will make you assess some things.
Exactly. So here I am entering my senior year thinking my life's going to head one way. Yeah. So now, I'm single and I'm not really finding that I'm loving what I'm studying. So now the question of, what am I going to do when I graduate? All these questions were swirling around. Well, what I ended up doing was joining InterVarsity Christian Fellowship and becoming a campus staff member at Duke University.
Oh,
and
wow.
The reason I feel like that's important to the story, a couple of things. One is that was the organization where I really grew in my faith in college. And I just really felt called and led to help other students because that organization had such an impact on me.
Great.
And it was during those years that really I began to understand this concept of my identity. And we'll go back and touch more on that. Mm-hmm. Then after the first 5 years out of college, crazy turn of events, but I received an acting scholarship and a modeling contract offer in New York City. And so I packed up everything I owned and drove up to New York City, not knowing a soul. And,
Wow, that's quite an undertaking. I mean, it's every girl's dream, right? It's those things that you dream about, but it's a little intimidating too.
it was intimidating. And what was so crazy, Lysa, is here I was at the age of 27 doing this.
Yeah,
And the first place I lived was in a model's apartment with girls who were 16 and 17. And they were battling the same stuff I was. And I thought, oh my gosh, if we had not built this foundation of my identity prior to me entering that environment,
yeah.
I shudder to think, and I have some really good stories about, that's an environment where you will learn how to have an unshakable identity because
Hmm.
it's sink or swim, right?
Yeah,
So I was there for about 4.5 years. And during my acting scholarship, I had an important realization. And that was, while I enjoyed being on camera and I enjoyed being in front of audiences, I myself would much rather prefer to be myself and talking about things that I'm passionate about versus playing a character.
hmm,
And that was
hmm.
a really important distinction because most of the people I was around felt the complete opposite. They would
Yeah,
have much rather been a character
yeah,
than be themselves. So once I had that realization, the door opened for me to become a full-time spokesmodel. I didn't even know that that was a thing, that that was a career. But when
yep.
I learned that there were companies and businesses
Yeah,
that wanted to use my skill set of being able to present, to stand up, and they would pay me to fly me all over North America and present on their behalf, I was like, this is the best thing ever.
exactly.
It
I
was
get to be
all
myself and use my skill sets.
exactly. So I had the privilege of doing that for 6 years. And around that time, I had just gotten married and I just knew that I didn't want to be gone all the time from I was traveling most weeks of the year. And so the door opened again through a colleague that I had worked with when I was working as a full-time spokesperson. And I ended up becoming a full-time presenter in the financial services space. And what was fascinating about that was I was hired because of my public speaking and presenting skills. And then
Yeah.
I went on to pass 5 different licensing exams within the first 10 months of employment that qualified me to be able to talk about these financial subjects. And so I spent the next 6 years as a financial education instructor and traveling nationwide on that company's behalf. But a few months into COVID, I got laid off. And so since that time, that's now been a year and a half. And
Yeah.
I have just full blown just been in business for myself. I've gotten a couple different coaching certifications and basically taken my 20 plus years of public speaking experience. And now I work as a public speaking coach and a personal empowerment coach. So I'm very grateful for, the course my life has taken. But as you can see, it's had a lot of twists and turns and a lot of
Yeah.
opportunities to learn about
So
building an unshakable identity.
let's take just a second and tell us where we can find you on social media. If somebody wanted to connect with you for speaking coaching or to follow you or those other kinds of things, where would they look for you?
Absolutely. So LinkedIn, you can find me Kristin Oakley Speaker, and that's Kristin with a K and 2 I's, and then Oakley like the sunglasses, but no relation. I always like to say that. So Kristin Oakley Speaker, and then on Facebook, I'm Kristin Oakley. And I have an Instagram account. I don't really do a whole lot with it, but it's
Okay.
the Kristin Oakley with underscores in between the and Kristin. So
Very good. Very good. All right. And I'll just quickly mention for anyone that wants to connect to Kristin, you can go out to Transformation Talk Radio under the Unshakable Living Show, find this episode, and the links to Kristin's social media are all listed on the website. So that would just be another method that people can reach out and contact you if they have questions as we
absolutely
go
would
on.
love.
So,
I always
yeah.
have 5 minutes to connect.
Yeah. So I want to go back, and you talked about getting laid off with COVID. I know COVID has impacted so many people's lives, maybe not quite as dramatically as, layoff, although there's been a lot of that too. Talk to me a little bit about what that did to your identity. Again, so many of us define ourselves by our work. It's that work ethic. It's that, what do you do? It's like the questions that we asked, on the description of the episode. Who are you? What do you do? Nice to meet you. What jobs do you have? So much of that is wrapped up. So walk us through a little bit, kind of what happened there.
Yeah. Oh, it's interesting. I feel like the last, since COVID hit, like you said, the last 2 years, so many people have had a shakeup in their lives
Yes.
of some nature. And so my hope is in me sharing this story that, no matter what the shakeup is that you yourself might be going through, that you'll be able to relate. So for me, the layoff was completely out of the blue.
Oh
And
man.
I had done everything I knew to do to be the best employee I could possibly be,
Yep.
bending over backwards, taking on extra assignments, going the extra mile consistently at the expense a lot of times of my own health. When I took the job, it was one thing. The job continued to morph. And I had been traveling Monday through Saturday most weeks of the year, which was not what the original job description was.
Mhm. Oh
And
yeah.
so, if you looked at my performance and based on that, I remember there were kind of some rumblings of, oh, what if there is a layoff? But everyone, including my manager at the time, oh, but you're fine.
Yeah.
You have such equity with this company. No, you don't need to worry, Kristin, right?
Mhm.
Well,
Mhm.
guess what? In one fell swoop, 50 of us were laid off in one day, but I was actually the only person on my team that day that got laid off.
Wow.
Now, fast forward, by the end of the year, that whole team had disbanded, and unfortunately, there were more layoffs. But
Mhm.
that was really humbling because there was nothing I could have done differently.
Yeah.
And I remember sitting in that layoff meeting and having the person say to me, "It's not personal."
Yeah.
And inside, everything just wanted to scream, "Yes, it is personal." Do you
Oh
not
yeah,
know the
absolutely.
blood, sweat, and tears and how I have poured my life into this role and this job and this company and sacrificed for your mission? And you're telling me it's not personal, but of course, kept it
Yeah.
together. But
Yeah.
it really it shook me, and it did, because once again, and with a job too, it's not just the identity of what you do, it's your living.
It
It's
is.
the paycheck, it's the stability, it's the health benefits, all that stuff wrapped up
Oh
in
yeah.
one. And it really felt like I'd been broken up with, is what it felt like. For
Oh
anyone
yeah.
who's ever been broken up with and it wasn't your choice, there's kind of that wave of emotion, the shock and the disbelief. And then there's like an anger phase. And then you
Oh
kind of have to
yeah.
come to
It's the
terms with
5
it. And
stages of grief. Yeah.
right, exactly.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
I had to move through that, and I had to trust and know, okay, clearly, even though this was a surprise to me and apparently everybody else that I worked with and everybody else around me, this wasn't a surprise to God. And it must be because He has something else for me, even though I
Yep.
don't know what that is.
Yep. So of course I'm going to take this and say, so this is the Unshakable Living Show, and we are divinely and supernaturally unshakable. What part did your faith play during this period?
Oh gosh, I mean, that was what I had to cling to. And I think this is a lesson that has shown itself multiple times throughout my life. And just when you think you've kind of mastered it, there's a new layer. And this was a new layer to that. I just had to keep reminding myself, Lord, you knew this was going to happen.
Yeah.
And so, and I know I would have never left on my own accord. And like I
Yeah.
said, I had really sacrificed my health. There were some things that were not ideal.
Mhm.
And so it was almost like, okay, God, you knew I would not leave on my own accord. So clearly you must have something else for me to do, because you have now removed me. you
Yes.
know,
Yeah.
and so, okay, what's next? And what do you
Hey,
have for?
and so now, 18 months later, looking back, did you ever go hungry?
I have never gone hungry.
Do you ever not have a roof over your head?
I've always had a roof over my head. Yes.
So, what's the long and the short of this? Yes, there's been adjustments. I'm sure there's still been continued challenges,
Mhm.
but God's seen you through. What has that looked and felt like?
It's been amazing to see His provision show up in ways that I would have never imagined. One of the things that I felt guilt. And the
Mhm.
reason I felt guilt is, up to that point in our marriage, I had always been the breadwinner. But
Oh,
to
yeah.
watch my husband, and so I felt very responsible, right? And like, what did I do wrong that I lost my job, right? When
Yes.
really this had nothing to do, but that's where our mind goes.
Oh, sure. Absolutely.
Yeah. But to watch my husband just step up in fresh ways. I mean, he's always supported, he's always worked very hard. He's a public school teacher, and unfortunately we don't value our public school teachers through
Yes.
pay, right? And so,
Yep.
but to see him be able to pick up some other jobs and say, I want you to take this time to explore your passions. You've sacrificed so much for this other company. Focus on you. Let me carry some of this burden. So that was one of the biggest blessings, is just
Wow.
how, I feel like it strengthened our marriage, whereas situations like this can often, put a lot of strain on a marriage. I think
Yeah.
it's really brought us closer as a unit. And he's like, look, you carried the weight for all these years. I'm gonna carry some of this weight now. I think too, it's also just help me search for the Lord again when you have that time and that space to say, okay, like, I thought this was my plan. If that's not the plan you have for me, show me what is, and grow me in that way. And fast forward a year later, my husband actually got a new position at the same school, and all of a sudden his salary, was able to increase. That was an unforeseen blessing. Or, when I've been coaching, and all of a sudden I find out that someone has purchased an additional extended coaching package with me. Like, what a blessing, when I've stressed at the beginning of the month wondering, okay, where's this provision going to come from? Next thing you know. So it's just, it forces you to be very vigilant and very dependent. But I think that's where the magic happens, when we realize it's not about us.
Yeah, and it's, as you and I have talked about, that's a little bit of a hard transition, but it is part of becoming unshakable. One is recognizing that you're part of a bigger picture.
Yes.
We talk about the tapestry with the knots behind the scenes, right? Yours was a really big knot when you got laid off. But on the front side of the tapestry, God's still building that beautiful tapestry, and he's just blending all the colors and the flow.
Yeah.
But in the moment, our natural selves want to react rather than release and surrender.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think this was a helpful journey in a lot of things we think are either or.
Yes.
But so much of life is both and.
Yes.
So, for example, I still needed to grieve, and I still needed to feel all the emotions that came with the layoff. But, God is still good. And this is part of his plan. So it's not one or the other, good versus bad. It's both and. And I think that was important. This was one of the times I really allowed myself to feel, and you have to feel things in order to heal them. And so being able to process through those emotions in a healthy way was really important.
And can you talk a little bit about what tools you used to process that emotion? The first one that comes to mind is journaling, but what other tools maybe did you use to allow yourself to feel, to actually, feel into those things and then be able to process and release them?
Yeah, that's a great question. Allowing yourself to cry is one of the healthiest things I think you can do.
Yeah.
And I, just really sitting with the Lord, and journaling was a huge part of that. I found out I was getting laid off, and then it was like, okay, your last day of work's today, but your last paycheck is coming in 2 weeks. And on the last day, I was sitting and reading my Bible, and he took me to a verse that I had never even really paid attention to before. And it said, you will go forth with peace, or you will go forth in joy and be let out with peace, something like that. Now I'm butchering it. I have to go back. But I just remember in that moment, it was confirmation of, okay, God, you're going to lead me. So there was that. There was pressing into community. Lysa, you and I met through a wonderful community called Unstoppable Influence. And so it was really leaning into other like-minded individuals. And I had a coach at the time, and really processing through that with her. It was, just being excited and thinking about, okay, this isn't happening to me, but the mindset of this is happening for me.
Oh, that is so
why
huge.
is it happening for me?
Yes. Yes, that is really, really huge. Okay.
So.
Right. And so I'm going to have you change hats here for just a second. So as a coach, when someone hits a major road bump in their life, What is your approach to coaching them through their shaking opportunity? You know,
Mhm.
you coach a number of different women, so you've seen things. What has your experience been that has helped others the most?
Mhm. I think for me, when I've been coached and now as a coach, that question of what is true
Mm,
and really helping people remember what is true. So for example, when someone is going through, because a lot of these situations create, I would call identity crises, right?
yes,
Whether that's the
yes,
loss of a relationship, the loss of the job, you thought your life was headed one way and now like that can cause this identity crisis. And so focusing on what is true, even if the feelings don't match where you're at, but let's look at some truth. Okay, what are the true facts of the situation? But then also, I always encourage people to do an identity check. And this is something that I have done multiple times. It was something that my mentor in college, the first time I really started focusing on this concept of identity, helped me understand. Making a list of all the things that I either have in the past or am currently placing my identity in.
yes,
Writing all that stuff down and looking at it and seeing, is this something that I can actually derive my identity and my worth from? Because identity and our worth are very closely linked. The problem, I believe, is when we are looking to things to fill us up or looking to things to derive our worth or our identity from that are not permanent. So
yeah.
therefore, when the shakings happen,
Mhm.
we're not able to remain unshakable because we've placed our faith, our hope, our trust, our identity, our worth into something that was never meant to do that for us.
That is really great.
And so being able to kind of see that identity check and say, okay, well, what is true? And just getting really honest with ourselves. Have I been putting too much of my identity or my hope or my trust in these things that aren't going to be unshakable?
Unshakable. And I think that's a really great lead into our giveaway today.
Mhm.
So I was not able to get the document added to my website, so we're going to do it via email. So Kristin has provided us with I'm going to say 3 columns, a
Mhm.
PDF spreadsheet, if you would, that talks about here's what I often think about myself, but here's what's true, and then a Bible or scripture reference to that thing. So talk us through just a little bit of how that came about. I know you kind of got it from your other ministry.
Yes.
What's the benefit and the power that you have found in that chart?
The benefit and the power for me has been that what we think about ourselves matters because it shows up in how we think of ourselves and therefore how we're projecting ourselves into the
Yes,
world and how we relate with other
yes,
people. So being able to say, one of those is on there, I feel unworthy, right? We feel that sometimes. Okay, what is true? Well, God says this about me. That's the truth.
yep,
Here's his word. Here's the reference in the Bible to back that up. That's where I need to be focusing in those moments where I'm shaking, because
yes,
that's what's true and that's going to help me remain unshakable. So just being able to clearly have that. So if you're having a day where you're having that thought, you can go to that sheet and be like, yeah, I do feel like this, but and what is true,
and yes,
right? This is the truth. Here's the proof to back that up. And I know for me, going through scripture and even putting my name and realizing these are God's
personalizing
words.
it, absolutely.
Exactly. Makes a world
Yep.
of difference in what we think about ourselves and how we show up.
Yep. And I think, again, I want to really encourage our listeners to go grab that PDF. And again, what you're going to do is email me at coachlysa@lysabelts.com. And just in the subject line of the email, just put the word identity. I promise I'm not going to hunt you down. It is not a sales tool. I will email you that PDF back. There's 30 different feelings, and then the truth, and then the scripture reference. So it's like, I feel unworthy, which Kristin already mentioned. I I'm hopeless. I'm unworthy, I'm lost. There's, I can,
we put a lot of it on there.
I have pulled it up on another screen, but I'm not going to get to it. So anyway, email me at coachlysa@lysabelts.com, and I will email that back to you. And my next show is on March 9th, and I'm actually going to continue to pursue this concept of identity and how we define ourselves and what shakes our identity. So I encourage you to tune back in on March 9th. Kristin, thank you so much for joining me tonight. I love having you on here. I really appreciate you taking time out of your evening. Tell your kiddies and your husband thank you as well. And I just pray God's best and biggest blessings on you.
Thank you. Same to you and all of you who are listening. Love you, Lysa.
All right. Thanks so much. See y'all on March 9th. You've been listening to the Unshakable Living Show, Supernaturally and Divinely Unshakable with Lysa Belts. Tune in twice a month for your well-deserved dose of positive energy and your personal reminder that you are perfectly imperfect, and that's okay. Find your true calling and influence the world around you for the better with your profound gifts. Walk away feeling truly unshakable. Remember, God can't steer a parked car, so step on the gas now with Lysa and let Him do the rest.